Welcome to the Thursday, March 10th, 2022 meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission. This meeting is being held in person for members of the commission and for applicants who have elected to also come in person. It is also being broadcast electronically for applicants who are not in person and members of the public who would like to participate. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 888-788-0099 or 213-338-8477.
Or you can do it in person.
Oh, yeah. Didn't I?
Sorry, that's implied, but you said
yes.
Telephone only.
Oh, yes. Public comment. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notes section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Ms. Thatcher, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ross.
Present.
Commissioner Willis.
Present.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Rockland.
Here.
Commissioner Fortner.
Here.
Commissioner Epperson.
Here.
Commissioner Quijano.
Here.
We've got a quorum. Nice to see everybody.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. All right, on to item C, approval of agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to tonight's agenda? I believe we received an updated one just recently.
Yeah, item 4, F4 was removed from the agenda because that petition was withdrawn by the applicant. So we have 3 hearings tonight.
Hearing and seeing no objections to the agenda, it is approved as presented. On to item D, public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. To comment on such other preservation matters, please call 877-853-5247. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand by using one by one by using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand, please press *9 on your phone.
Or they can come up to the podium.
Or come up to the podium if you are in the auditorium. Kristen, do we have any callers?
No callers have indicated.
And see no one in the chambers. I will now close the public comment portion for tonight. On to item E, unfinished business. There is no unfinished business. So we'll move into the hearings. Item F1, 524 First Street.
This 2-story gable fronter features gable corner returns, woodlap siding with shingles in the front gable, wood corner board trim, a cut stone foundation, 1/1 windows, and a brick half-width wraparound front porch with a pedimented gable, half-height round columns and brick wing walls along the wood front stairs. It first appears in city directories in 1904 as the home of George and Matilda Buerley, and it's located on the west side of South First Street, south of West Jefferson and north of West Madison in the Old West Side Historic District. The applicant is seeking HTC approval to construct a 195 square foot addition and a 15 by approximately 12 foot wood deck on the rear of the home. This is the house from the street. We'll just take a walk around it in photos. It's a combination of photos from the review committee and that were submitted by the applicant. This is the north side of the house. Now we've flipped around. You can see back here there are a couple of additions on the back of the house. These are both modern, these 1-story parts, and it'll make sense on this slide. It's this one that's a little bit higher, and then this rear addition. So currently 2 small additions. This 1.5-story wing on the back predates 1945. Another photo of the rear. And where the deck is, but not that large, is where an addition, a 1-story addition, is proposed to infill this rear corner of the house. There are 2 windows you can see in these photos. That would be enveloped by the addition. This one is proposed to remain on the interior as a pass-through window, but this one would come out because the wall would be taken down. Now we're on the, let's see, this must be the south side of the house, alongside the driveway. And here's on the left is a drawing of the lot, a site plan showing the existing house, 1906, the 1960s additions here that wrap around the corner, and where the proposed addition would go. Here you can see it well on the basement plan. This is set in a good, let's see, 2 feet from the corner, which is much appreciated. And it's bumped out a little bit to distinguish it from that other addition on the back on this corner. This is the existing wall where the dashed lines are. So this would essentially push the kitchen out, give them a lot more room to work with. And also here's the deck on the back of the house. It's a wood deck with appropriate styles of railings and some steps going down to the backyard. There is a section drawing that's helpful in the application attachments. Here's what the rear elevation would look like with the addition. This gabled rear-facing addition would imitate the front of the house, where there is a front-facing, more of a pedimented gable on top of the front porch, but it's designed to imitate that and be complementary to that, which we already know works well with the house. And here we have the north elevation and the south elevation. This is the side that's the most visible, where that deck is now. And we've just got a very simple wood deck extending off the back. And this is the existing addition that this would jut out just a little bit from. And the roof is taller, of course. So going through the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines that most apply. Secretary of the Interior Standard number 1 says a property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. Number 2 says the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. Number 5 says distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property will be preserved. Number 9 says new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. Number 10 says new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property will be unimpaired. From the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines for additions, recommended is constructing a new addition so that there's the least possible loss of historic materials and so that character-defining features are not obscured, damaged, or destroyed. Also recommended is considering the attached exterior addition both in terms of the new use and the appearance of other buildings in the historic district or neighborhood. Design for the work may be contemporary or may reference design motifs from the historic building. And from the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for all additions, it's appropriate to place a new addition on a non-character defining or inconspicuous elevation and limit the size and scale in relationship to the historic property. Also designing a new addition in a manner that makes clear what is historic and what is new. It's also appropriate to place new walls in a different plane from the historic structure in a subordinate position to the historic fabric, and to limit the size and scale of the addition in relationship to the historic building so that it does not diminish or visually overpower the building or the district. The addition's footprint shall not exceed 1/2 of the original building's footprint or 1/2 of the original building's total floor area. All right, let me run back up to some of my notes. So in terms of the footprint and floor area, this addition falls well within the 50% guideline for the maximum amount of additions. The footprint with this addition would be 45.5%, and the floor area would be at 22.8%. Windows on the proposed addition are Pella wood casements that are clad in aluminum. They're proportioned to be complementary in size and shape to the historic windows. The new door is also a Pella full-light aluminum, full-light aluminum-clad wood. Cladding on the addition is woodlap to match the house with shingle gable trim to match the front gable. I'm really not concerned about this matching too much because of the window configuration, the locations of the windows, the foundation materials. It's going to look like an addition, and it's not. I don't believe it's going to be confused as something old by anyone, even if it has wood siding on it. Staff believes that the work does not have a detrimental effect on historic materials, features, or spaces, and that the application should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Commissioners Quijano and myself were on the review committee. Do you want to start, Commissioner Quijano?
Sure.
I can.
I don't have too much more to add. The photographs and the staff report were very thorough. I guess the one thing that I did take note of as we were walking towards the driveway from I guess that's the south side, you do get kind of a clear view along that elevation of the property, that side of the property. And the proposed addition is set back, as Ms. Thatcher said, 2 feet from that back corner. So it would be further back than that railing that we see right now. So kind of tidies that up, I think. Not that that's currently an issue, but that would be a visual change. Other than that, not much more to add.
Yeah, I also agree with staff's report. I think this house is very well maintained. It's has a lot of its original character defining features. I think the proposed addition is pretty straightforward. This photo you would see the addition, from the street, but I think you'd see like the back of it. It's much lower than the rest of the house, and there's a nice view shed even to the back, carriage house that's back there as well. So I don't think it draws too much away from the house overall. I don't really have anything else to add. I think this one is pretty straightforward. All right, and the applicant, I believe, is here in person with us. So if you would like to step up to the podium, is there a list to write their name?
There's not.
Okay.
Just ask them to state their name.
Okay, if you could state your name for the record, and if you have anything you'd like to add to the staff report or review committee report, you have up to 3 minutes to speak.
My name's Ted Ramsey, and I've always admired the Old West Side Association and living there. And earlier I lived in a small house, and it was further up by the high school. And my kids went to the Boss School and loved it. And when we started looking for a house, we went all over town, and we ended up coming back to the Old West Side. And we were fortunate that this house was available, and so we made an offer on it. And we've been there, let's see, how many years? 21, yeah. And so it was since when was it? 2001. And it's been a pleasure to live there. I walked to work at the university and never drove. And at this point, I have a 23-year-old Volkswagen with 70,000 miles on it, so it paid to walk. And we've been delighted to go like we walked over here tonight, and we'd walk over downtown, we'd go to the banks, we'd do a little shopping, and it's been a delightful place to live. The street is great, the neighbors are fantastic. And we... Okay, I'll be very quick. I do want to say that what we did, we spent a lot of time looking at the house with the architects, and we made suggestions on keeping roof lines and window sizes and everything to be compatible with the original house. And as an artist, I thought it was incredibly important that we not change the architectural aesthetic of it. And so we stayed as close as we could and still get a kitchen that we could work in.
I'm Marcia Polenberg, Ramsey, married to Ted. And the necessity for enlarging the kitchen is that our kitchen is minuscule and that two people can't stand in there and work at the same time. Plus, we have a ventilation problem, and it actually is a violation. Our stove doesn't, it's a gas stove, it doesn't vent to the outside. And so we get the fumes and the smoke and, you know, and sometimes enough is enough. And we love the historic nature of not only our house, but the neighborhood. I'm very much a neighborhood person, and I walk my dog and I know a lot of people. And I prize the architecture as it is. And actually, we were looking at windows yesterday, stained glass windows, to go at Materials Unlimited. And I found 3 that are the top picks. So we're keeping that window. I love the architecture. So, and then from the rear, we're going to use the old window and have it face on the inside. So we're using the old materials. We preserve whatever we can. That's beautiful. It is beautiful. That's why we're happy to live there.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, commissioners, do you have any other questions for the applicant?
I had a question.
Sure.
Hi. On the drawings, it says skylight question mark on, I think, one of the interior elevations. So I'm curious, are you adding a skylight to the roof anywhere, or has that been scratched, or that was maybe in error?
We're not 100% sure that we'll need it. We're thinking of it, about it.
Okay.
But
It's not drawn, but
has
can you
to
tell
do
us where it
with
might be if
having
you
enough
plan to
light.
install it?
and we're just not sure.
Um,
I'm not an architect,
Yeah.
you know, but I want light.
Where would the skylight be if you choose to install the skylight?
I need the side view again.
This one?
Yeah,
It would
right
be
there, probably.
approximately up here.
So it'd be in the roof location,
On the driveway side.
on the driveway side.
Since it's not drawn on here, Commissioners, that would be a really
No, it
easy
isn't on
staff
there.
approval.
Staff approval?
Yeah, yeah. If you decide you want to install it later,
Discussion, and we didn't come to a decision.
Yeah.
Truth is.
Marcia and Ted, if you decide that you want to install it later,
I'm sorry.
no, it's okay, it's okay. If you decide later that you want to install it, it's a very easy staff approval. You would just fill out a new application. It's a $35 fee. Because this is in the back out of sight on a new wing, I can staff approve that for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any additional questions?
It is so hard to hear people with masks on.
Yeah, and you can't see.
You guys are great. You're used to it.
Okay, we can now move on to the public hearing portion for this application. This is for an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the application at 524 South First Street. If you would like to speak, please indicate by pressing *9 on your phone.
And you guys can go ahead and sit down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do we have any callers indicating to speak?
No callers have indicated.
I believe there were also some communications sent, is that correct, regarding this addition?
There were 2 support letters that were emailed to you.
that were emailed, just.
Neighbors on this block in support of the project.
All right. I will now close the public hearing portion for the application. Is there a commissioner that would like to make a motion? Commissioner Quijano, you were.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 524 South First Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to construct a 195 square foot addition and a 15-foot by approximately 12-foot wood deck on the rear of the home. As proposed, the work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, materials, and relationship to the building and the surrounding area, and meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for additions and the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, 5, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for additions and building site.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Quijano, seconded by Commissioner White. Is there a discussion on the motion? Commissioner Rockler.
Well, I think this project, I agree with what I've heard so far. I think it meets the standards, and I appreciate the high-quality materials that are being used on the project, and clearly it was designed with a lot of respect for the historic structure, so I appreciate that as well.
Thank you for your comment. Any other discussion? We're ready to vote? All of those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All of those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. Thank you. All right, and we'll now move on to item F2 at 220 South 7th Street.
Commissioners, do any of you need a paper copy of this staff report? You've got electronic copies, but I wanted to make sure that Commissioner White had one. Looks like he does.
Yes.
Okay, all right, we're good. 220 South 7th is in the Old West Side Historic District. It's a single-story home that first appears in city directories in 1896 as number 16 South 7th Street, the home of Louis Schneierly. Members of the Schneierly family lived at this address until at least 1940. It features a front-facing gable, sculpted block foundation, and nearly full-width concrete block front porch with wing walls and square wood half columns. House is located on the west side of South 7th, south of West Washington and north of Murray Court, and it's in the floodplain of an Allen Creek tributary. The applicant is seeking HTC approval to construct a second-floor rear addition on top of existing modern rear additions and replace a modern garage with a taller garage in the same footprint. All right, this is the front of 220 South 7th. The complicating factor is that by virtue of being in the floodplain, the house may not be expanded, the footprint, per the stormwater code. So it's up or nowhere. Also proposed in this application is to replace the garage. Same deal. They can reuse the footprint of the existing garage, but that could not get larger. So this single-story house has a succession of additions. Let me walk you around the front. You can tell the applicant's photos taken in the snow versus my photos taken in the mud. The house was built in a couple of phases. This 16-foot deep front section was probably moved onto this site because it predates, the method of construction predates the date of the house when it first appeared on this lot. It's a much older method of construction. Most likely at the time that it was moved here, part of this back part of the house was added on, so maybe back to about here. There's a good diagram I'll get to in the middle in a minute. And this is a kitchen. This wing was also added at that time. I believe this is the kitchen. And then there's a little screen room back here. These two additions, this one with a shed roof and this one with a gabled roof, were added on later. Those are the modern additions plus the screen room. When I'm talking about the modern additions, those are the ones that I mean, and that's where a second floor addition is proposed to be added. Moving around the driveway side, the north side of the house, you can kind of see here, I think, where the last of the additions was put on and the 1960s garage. has a kind of a unique sculpted block foundation that's more sculpted than usual, has a little more relief. And just a couple of photos of the existing garage. This is the north side along the property line. Okay. House, this is the proposed site plan on the left. You can see where the additions stack up on the back and where the second floor addition would be placed. And here's the footprint of the garage. This is a very good drawing showing the earliest section of the house, the first addition onto the back with this kitchen little wing off to the side, and then the new additions behind. House is currently 1,295 square feet. The pre-1945 footprint, or during the period of significance, was 932 square feet. And there's no proposed change to the footprint, of course. So the total footprint area of the additions is 39% of the pre-1945 footprint. For the floor area, the pre-1945 floor area was the same, 932 square feet. And the additions right now add 363 square feet. And the proposed additions add 296 square feet for a total increase of 659, which is 70.7 of the pre-1945 structure. And unfortunately, that does significantly exceed the local historic district design guideline that says the addition should not exceed 50% of the original building's total floor area. Let's go through. The floor plans are in the packet. They're always helpful to understand what's going on. This is the front elevation. You can see that there's not a lot of room in this attic, so we briefly discussed, but it's just not useful as a finished space because there's just not enough of it and it's not tall enough. You can see the kitchen wing going off to the side here. All of the existing doors and windows on the existing house are proposed to stay. Back here you can see the kitchen wing, and this must be one of the additions, and this is the shed roof addition. This is the farther one. This is the one in the center, and the screen room. It's got a little deck here on the side that would remain, and on the back. And here's the driveway side as it exists today. There's a severe drop off here. The base flood elevation is at about 6 feet of the garage, which I believe sits lower down here. So it is a substantial base flood elevation. Revised floor plan. This is, let's see, back here is where the screen porch is now. That would be converted into a stairwell and a little mudroom addition on the back of the kitchen, or maybe this is a table, I'm not sure which. And here you can see a roof plan showing where the new addition sits on top of those rear additions. Has a bedroom, a bath, a closet, and here's the stairwell tucked into the corner. From the front, you can see that the new roof, the architect drew this up with both a front-facing gable and side-facing gables, like you see here. And the front-facing gable just looked much more massive than this drawing. And I think they wisely went with the side-facing gables. You can see it's a sort of a series of steps down here that is to accommodate the stair going up. And you can also see the new garage here in the background. Unfortunately, our screens that we are looking at up here make everything squished and a little taller and pointier looking than necessary, so keep that in mind when you're looking at these. And the paper copies and the electronic copies are a better version than these little screens. But here we have the south side elevation, 2 new gables, 3 new gables, and a little bit of infill roof here to tie everything together. This goes from a shed to a hip over the kitchen. This is the back of the house. We see the garage on the left. There's a new person door down here, or maybe that's an existing, I'm not sure, but there's a new person door here on the side where this guy is going in. Clad 1/1 windows are proposed. There's that new door. And that's that was the driveway side. The garage is unique, and it's I think a great solution to a problem of trying to put a new building up in a floodway. So in the past, we've had a few garages come through where they have to have floodgates. They usually take up the bottom like 2 feet here, and they open when water passes through and let the water flow freely through the building. And in this case, they proposed to use 1x8 vertical boards with 3.25, 3.5 inches in between. So it's essentially more like open like a fence would be, but it's to allow the water to pass through, and you don't have to deal with the floodgates that open and close, and it also keeps critters out, which is probably a big advantage. On the front elevation, the whole thing is clad in board and batten, and the second floor is board and batten, which is also very compatible with the very vertical looking first floor. And these are breakaway flood doors. So if a flood did rush through here, these doors are designed to get out of the way. All right. There's a person door here on the back of the garage with a half staircase going up, and then there must be another half staircase inside to get up to a finished room on the second floor. From the Secretary of the Interior standards, I think I read all these to you already. I read you 1 and 2 and 9 and 10. From the guidelines for building site, not recommended is removing or radically changing buildings and their features or site features, which are important in defining the overall historic character of the building. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for all additions, it's appropriate to place a new addition on a non-character defining or inconspicuous elevation and limiting the size and scale in relationship to the historic property. Also placing new walls in a different plane from the historic structure in a subordinate position to the historic fabric. It's also appropriate to limit the size and scale of the addition in relationship to the historic building so it does not diminish or visually overpower the building or the district. The addition's footprint should exceed neither half of the original building's footprint nor half of the original building's total floor area. And it's not appropriate to design an addition that overpowers or dramatically alters the original building through size, height, or materials. All right, let me get you back up to the drawings. So staff does have concerns about the total floor area increase and the necessary height of the addition. I do appreciate that the architect tried valiantly to get this as low as possible, but I do believe that the height and the floor area are contrary to several of the guidelines that I've read to you and others that are in the staff report. I have suggested 2 different motions if you want to use them. One is for the addition and one is for the garage, in case you want to consider them separately and one at a time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Commissioner Chicano and myself were on the review committee. I can start this one off. Can you go back up to the photos, Ms. Thatcher?
Yeah.
So I think the photos are pretty clear in depicting, maybe, is there one from the front toward the street? The house is, as stated, it's in the floodplain. So it actually, it sits relatively low, especially being a single-story home. There is another house that's adjacent that's 1.5 to 2 stories that's slightly taller, and then there's a apartment building immediately on the north of this that is much more modern in character. It's definitely not historic in nature. It is pretty visible as you drive either way on 7th or walking through. You do see the extents of the house all the way back up to the garage and some of the additions that are back there. I think the photos from the rear are pretty clear to show how it, it's a little bit mishmash in the back. So, but the lot is actually really, really deep and low. So I think there's it's an interesting feature and I think concept to work with. We did kind of look to see, you know, where that exact distinction was between existing and new on the driveway side, where they're showing the addition to move to the two-story portion. That is not the original, so they've stayed out of the original footprint of the house, so that's appreciated. I'm also mixed on this one. I do have concerns about the increase in floor area but I also understand the constraints for the footprint. I think it's an interesting concept, and I do think the addition is pushed extremely far back, but there is a lot of visibility because the house and the roof line are so low. I don't know if I have anything else.
Not a whole lot more to add, just maybe more about the context. So it is interesting that, you know, this was moved from another location, so the most historic portion of this home, you know, it's in a different context. It's not like its neighbors.
Right.
So the district that it's in a sense. And beyond its north and south immediate neighbors, all the other homes are, even if they were all on level ground plane, they'd be significantly taller than this home. Its rear yard neighbors are also quite taller. So, you know, even with the proposed additions, it would still be shorter than its neighbors. But yeah, I agree with all the other comments that were made.
Thank you, Commissioner. Would the applicant please step forward and state your name for the record? You have up to 5 minutes to speak if you have anything you'd like to add to the staff report or review committee report.
Okay. I am Carl Huter, and I have been coming in front of this commission since 1978. And I don't come here very often because I usually work with Jill and try and get things done without him needing your good help. And I'd like to say, you know, in the 40-some years I've been practicing, this is probably one of my more difficult ones to do. As we understand, in 1972, when the Old West Side Historic District was created, floodplains and floodways were not significant features in the development of Ann Arbor. Now they're paramount, and this project, there's different floodplain levels. I read one of them had us at 7'9", you know, the tip of my fingers. That's the entire property underwater to a depth of 7'9". And because of that, a lot of times, like the previous submission, we would seek to add on to the rear of the property and hide the new structure. But that's not an opportunity that's available to us because of the FEMA regulations. For me, with my structural background, it was a fun house to go through because there's so many, it's like a history of framing, from timber framing to sawn and timber framed before wire nails were, and then later on those odd little additions on the back. The first practical difficulty and hardship that we have that's not self-imposed is the floodplain issue. And the second one is the house the contributing structure is very small, and that 70 years ago, you know, some 10 years after the cutoff date, I can't remember, was it 1940 or 1945? I didn't.
44 was the last year.
What?
44 was the last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, 6 or 7 years after 1944, 50, 51, those additions starting to pop on, and those are from 70 years ago, and they're contributing to diminishing that 50% area that we're allowed. And as I looked at the history of the house, you know, every 50 or 60 years or so, someone would expand the house by one time 165%, then 40%, and now 70 years later we want to add another 36, 39% to the house. Because every time it was done for the current property owner to meet the demands of the existing, at that time, contemporary times that they needed. I really tried to work very hard at making that addition as small as possible. 5'6" plate height, tucking the rest of all the rooms under the roof, having the roof slope back from the street, which is a typical ploy to eliminate the massing. And wherever I could, I cut down the ridge line, again, to mitigate that massing. The garage is in very poor condition. The foundation is heaving and breaking it apart, and it needs replaced. And we would like to get some space in the attic of the garage in order to have a studio office area, and that space has to be above the floodplain height. So it's a little bit taller, but as you drive around the Old West Side, there are any number of carriage barns in the backs of the buildings that are 1.5, 2 stories high. And because the new structure we're proposing is a little taller, it seemed to fit well with that. That height is negotiable. I appreciate the comments from Jessica, whose last name I can't pronounce. About the fact that as you go through the neighborhood, most of the Old West Side homes developed are 1.5, 2-story houses, some with a 3rd-story attic space. And this is a small house created at a different period of time than those homes around it. The houses behind this one sit on a hillside, so they have a 3-story face towards this house that's only 1 story high. It's just, it's the requirements of historic standards and whatnot are, the rules and regulations that are forged to fit the generally most cases, yet there are unique conditions and practical difficulties and hardships. And as I look at this just it has that criteria that I know that you're all going to set your good minds to and help us find a solution where this couple, newly moved from Ghana to come in Ann Arbor and starting their new family and live here, hopes to be able to expand it a little bit more so they and their expanding family have a place to live in Ann Arbor for the next 15, 20 years. Thank you. I'm here to answer questions.
Sure. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Huter? No? No questions? Actually, I do have one. If you could, I think you touched on it a little bit, but can you just maybe talk about the height in relation to the floor area increase and the need and how that's playing in, is that playing into the overall height of the addition?
Right. So the plate height is 5'6". It's about at the peak of the contributing structure ridge. It's a very flat roof. I think it's less than 312. And so I wanted that wall to be there for the old structure to butt into, and then immediately at that point, the roof is going up and away from the existing contributing structure. And I think that new roof is about 40 feet back from the front of the house. And then we have a modest 10 by 12 bedroom, a very small 6 by 6 closet, and a little tiny 8 by 8 bathroom tucked in under those roof planes. So everything's under the roof. The kitchen, I want to point out, is only 6 foot 8 inches tall. And it's not a code habitable space. And we want to pull that roof up to get more space in there. The rest of the rooms in the existing house are 7'4", 7'6". And and then in doing all the work, we want to get rid of that cement asbestos siding. And once that's undertaken, we can discover what the original siding was on the house. And as you looked at that rear elevation, there's like 4 distinct different sided and different additions on it. And I wanted to knit that all together to make it a whole structure that would fit in with the character of the Old West Side. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners?
I had one, but it was just answered by Carl. I was wondering how far back that the eave of the addition is that butts the rear of the existing. You said 40 feet. Is that correct?
let me see. It's
Go back up to the,
16 and 18, so that's 34, and then there's the 8-foot porch, so it's 42 foot back from the...
porch, 42 foot back.
Sir, go to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mr. White.
That's why I was repeating you. That's,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, from the front of the porch, it's what I would just, 42 feet back.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll now open for public hearing. This. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Come on. If you could just state your name for the record.
I'm Kelvin Hughes.
Heidi Burns.
Okay, welcome.
And I'm from up north, but just wanted to say I was living in Ann Arbor for my undergrad and my medical training here since 2004, and left for a few years and met Kelvin in Ghana, and I returned during the pandemic, and we were apart for quite a few months, and I was here doing some work, and we actually lived on 7th Street when he came, after we were allowed to kind of come back together after the pandemic, and this opportunity kind of came up shortly after, and we're really excited to be able to live on 7th Street and enjoy everything at home.
Okay. Thank you.
Heidi's been quite modest in that she came back because of the call for doctors during the pandemic, and we were separated for 6 months, and she left our honeymoon to come back because Ann Arbor means a lot to her. And we fell in love with 7th Street, and because we were just a block and a half up. We were walking in West Park and trying to run as well, but that didn't happen as much. But I think the other thing to say is that the garage is really important for us. As you can tell from my funny accent, I'm not from around here. Our family lives all around the world, and having the opportunity for them to come and visit and have a base to explore Michigan and stay with us. And my parents are very keen to come and get to know their 9-month-old grandson much better. And having a place that we can have them is really, really important for us. And I think the other thing to say is that I grew up in London, and the architecture is part of the fabric and the culture that we have there. The school I went to was founded in 1573, and the building I was in school for 7 years, 1691. So the reason we've chosen Carl and also Amos and David, our builders, is because we wanted to be respectful to the Historic District Commission. We wanted to contribute to that. The house is a little bit janky and needs some TLC, and I think that the reason we won the bid actually was because no one else wanted it. The only people that wanted it were investors that were going to turn it into rental, and the other sort of families that were interested said it was too much work, and that's why we got it. But we do want to restore it to what we hope was its former glory and contribute positively to the Old West Side.
Thank you
Hopefully
very much.
be like this couple in 21 years' time.
Thank you for
Thank you
sharing.
so much for having us, guys. Thank you.
I will now open this to the public hearing. If this is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the application at 220 South 7th Street. Kristen, do we have any callers?
There are no callers.
So I will close the public hearing. Is there a commissioner that would like to make a motion on the application? We have Commissioner Rockland.
Shall I do the garage first, maybe? Which would you like first? I'll do them separately, but do you?
I don't have a preference. If
You
you
don't have a preference? Well, okay, I'm looking for it.
let me
Here,
see
hold
it,
on.
what they.
I'll do the garage first.
Okay.
I move that the commission approve with conditions and issue, why does it say approve with conditions? Are there conditions for the garage?
No.
No conditions.
Oh, just that,
Maybe
there are-
there's something above?
just that I needed more information on the door,
Okay.
the person door.
The person door.
Yeah.
I will keep that in there then. I move that the commission approve with conditions and issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 220 South 7th Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to replace a modern garage with the taller garage in the same footprint, on the condition that the door details are reviewed by staff in a separate application. As conditioned, the work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, materials, and relationship to the building and the surrounding area, and meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for additions and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for additions and building site.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Rockland, seconded by Commissioner White. Is there a discussion on the motion? Anyone?
Seeing none.
I'm
Well,
sure
how
there's
far
a
back is the
discussion I need to, right.
Looking at this elevation, it doesn't really give you the feel that you'll have there, right?
Right, so the garage is pretty far back.
Yeah.
In the overall scheme of the house. It sits back from, I was going to
Right.
say, it doesn't quite clear all the additions.
It's
Go ahead.
It's 10 feet. When we take the garage down, the building code says we can't rebuild it in exactly where it is, so we have to push it back a little bit. It has to be 10 feet away from the existing house.
Is that,
So it ends up being 10 foot back.
And
I
that'll-
think on the site plan, I show that 10-foot dimension. On the proposed site plan, didn't I?
yeah, it looks like there's a diagonal dimension.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so it's actually even a little further from the rear of the,
Yeah, it's back
Addition.
behind the
Yeah.
house, yes.
okay. I'm just looking at some of the guidelines that are referenced. I think, and I can state, I guess, a couple. The garage is quite a ways back from the street, and it being set back from the house, I think is helpful. I think we've talked a little bit about, the site itself being pretty low and depressed from the road, and it actually dips in elevation as you go further back. I think the only concern I have is the height in relation then to the rest of the project. Depending on, what happens with that motion, is there an issue with the height?
Okay, are you recommending we,
I think
Did I
I'm
do it in the
questioning,
wrong
do we
order?
need to discuss the addition first?
can we
If that's-
hold and
Yeah.
postpone this until we, I didn't think
Just-
that through.
Just hold off on this, and you can now make the motion for the addition, and we can come back to the garage, that's fine.
Great, let's do it. One moment, please. There it is. I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 220 South 7th Street, a contributing property in the Old West Side Historic District, to construct a second-floor rear addition on top of existing modern rear additions on the following conditions: that the clapboard siding is wood or cementitious with this exposure similar to the lap siding in the house's front gable, and that the addition's windows and doors are reviewed by staff in a separate application. As conditioned, the work is compatible in exterior design arrangement materials and relationship to the building and the surrounding area, and meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for additions, and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for additions and building site.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Rockland, seconded by Commissioner White. Is there a discussion on the motion? Anyone that wants to jump first?
So I have just a general, just general opinion, not having to.
Pardon me, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, microphone close. Yeah, so just my general opinion, not having been to the site, I just think that the project as a whole, like when you combine this higher garage and this high addition, the cumulative impact, it's going to end up having a kind of a drastic change to the look and the feel of this site. So I understand the idea of like approving the garage first. To me, just the project as a total would have a really kind of drastic impact on the site as a whole. So I don't know if I can support both the garage and the addition. Perhaps I can support just the garage at this point, but certainly not both. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Commissioner White, did you?
Well, one of the things, that structure is the lowest part of the neighborhood. And everything surrounding that neighborhood is larger. There's an apartment building that's out there, it's taller than that building. It's on the back, it goes up a hill, so whatever is there, they're looking down on the property that's there, and going the other way, they're the lowest. So whatever they're building there, no one in the neighborhood is going to be looking up. They're all going to be looking down.
So,
I guess there's, I'm definitely struggling here, as we all seem to be. The project is very well thought out and detailed. The design is, just so thorough and obviously, very intelligent and thoughtful. And then there's the standards that say that, 50% is the maximum and that you shouldn't overpower the historic portion of the house. Then you have the fact, like what Commissioner White just brought up, where this is a particular situation in a floodplain. You cannot do the rear addition that we've seen other, let's say, short-statured homes accomplish with a very large backyard and maybe a very large, a 50% one-story addition or maybe a 60% one-story addition or something like that. That's not available here. So that's what I'm struggling with.
mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I agree. It's a head scratcher
Yeah.
because, there's the letter of the guidelines and standards, and then, there's how best can they meet the intent and the goals of it with such a unique case, right? It's interesting to hear the applicant mention that when they were bidding on the home, that, all other viable options or bidders were rental, to be rental properties. And is that what we want to promote versus a homeowner who's going to invest in the property and care for it in a way that their neighbors presumably are. So that adds, for me, an interesting layer as well, that other factor. On paper, it seems, there are certain guidelines that it doesn't meet, but I think there's value there to be considered in the other aspects that the applicant has presented.
I agree with that assessment. I think this is it's a tricky case, and I think that I appreciate the applicant stating their, providing the information regarding the intent to restore a historic home that has a very particular challenge, a very tricky challenge. I think, as I was trying to pull up the guidelines and just look through the first, several, 1, 2, 9, and 10, the one, I think it definitely meets the property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use. It requires minimal change to distinctive materials, features, spatial relationships. I think for the most part that's met. The spatial relationships may be, a little bit in question, but I think for the most part it's staying within the same footprint. The height is really, I think, the one thing in question, but I think the lot lends itself to a little bit of a flexible, I'd say, spatial relationship. The historic character of the property will be retained. The entire front main portion of the property is going to be completely visible and almost untouched, with the exception of the wing to the south of the property. I think for me, it becomes a question about, as we maybe move down into number 9, where we get into the new work will be differentiated. I think it definitely will be, but the massing size and scale, the roof height is, we get into the question of, is it going to be so overpowering and looming in the back as we can move to the back of the house and things really start to get higher? And I think that's the questionable piece for me, and that's where the additional floor area also becomes questionable for me. Because if we didn't have the additional floor area up there, we might not have the height issue that would be bringing this as an additional issue. So I think that's the one piece that is my struggle. I was just going to look to see it, number 10, since I'm going through. Should be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the property would remain. I believe we meet that one. So for the most part, I think we're meeting the majority of the guidelines. I'm just, again, looking at Ann Arbor, and I think most of those are similar, say something similar than the ones that were just read.
Well, so in not recommended additions, designing a new addition so that its size, scale, and relation to the historic building are out of proportion, thus diminishing the historic character. So that's a question to ask yourself is, does this proposed addition diminish the historic character of the property or not?
Well, one of the questions is, in the neighborhood, they mentioned, if they had other buildings around them that are already taller than that building. And so since they're the lowest, it's not going to be taller than the ones that are already existing in the neighborhood. You're still going to be looking down at that from if I'm in one neighbor, I'm in that house looking at their house.
I agree. I think the neighborhood context will not be diminished or changed in any way by the addition. I'm more thinking about the historic structure on the property itself. Will that be diminished? And so that's to me the question.
No, that's a tough one. I'm almost leaning toward it. It won't be, because of how much of the historic building is still prevalent and untouched, and it's pretty far back. It was 40 feet from the porch, and that's another, 10 feet or so from the front walk. It's hard to visualize, though. It's a little bit different once it's in place, but. And I do think the design is pretty well considered as far as how that new roof would interact with the existing roof. It creates, even though we don't have the step back like we would normally like to see on an addition, it gives a distinct change and plane from the original roof, and I think the foundation is different in that portion.
Let's vote.
Is everybody ready for a vote? Okay. All of those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
All of those opposed, please say no.
No.
The motion carries. Should we move on to the garage motion? Carl, do you have something that you'd like to?
No,
Okay.
I came up too quickly, but
Okay.
I have a bad back, so I have to walk around.
We'll finish the second motion, the garage motion. Do we need to reread it, or?
No, it's the same.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think
you're
there's any
good.
change.
As long as Dave
Okay.
and Bob are good,
Without
you're good.
reading it, yeah.
Okay. So I guess the question is the addition of the garage and the additional height going to be an issue with the in comparison with the house itself? there going to be an added component?
I got to say, this is an application that really would have benefited, I think, from a perspective drawing, because the elevation, don't put that up unless you don't want to do the project any favors, because it just looks tall. But in perspective, it's not going to look tall. I don't think it's going to disappear half of it behind the house, and then it's going to be lower than the new roof, and it sounds like it's going to be lower than neighboring houses. So it's a tough one to visualize without a drawing.
I agree.
What do you guys think?
No, I agree, having that, like a perspective view just from the side, public right of way would have helped you perceive how far back it is, the depth before you even get to the new roof, which is then sloping away from you. So that making that gesture of rotating the roof form certainly helped. But I agree, that type of a drawing or image would have been helpful. But regarding the garage, even in the elevation that we see, the front elevation, you
Can we look at a photo of the existing garage from the sidewalk, and we can
Oh, yeah, there,
ask how much
That-
taller it is, and
that last, what's that?
then we can squint?
There it is, right there.
That one.
See,
You can see how far back it is. So,
Right.
so the existing garage is way back, it's down a foot or so, and the plate height is I don't even think it's an 8-foot plate height, and then it has this 312 roof pitch on it, which is uncharacteristic to most of the structures in the Old West Side. So we're going to have an 8-foot plate and then a 4-foot sidewall, which will probably be about the height of the existing garage roof, and then the peaked roof on top of that. It's a 20-foot width, 12-12 pitch, so it'll be 10 more feet. So it's 14 and 8, that's 22 feet, 14 and 8, yeah, 22 feet high. Whereas the garage that you're looking at right now is probably 11 or 12 feet high. And I'm sorry. Hold on. David, you're correct. You can't have the big garage next to the little house. And the garage can be taller, I felt, because if the house could be taller, and then of course the apartment building right next door is up about 5 feet in the grade elevation and much taller, and it seemed to fit back there. And then the trees down the north side of the property line are 40, 50 feet tall, and they all, you have to recognize that the landscaping too affects the massing and the look and the volumes and whatnot.
Right.
Thank you. Any additional comments? You guys ready for a vote? I think so. All right, all of those in favor, please say yes.
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 All of those opposed, please say no. The motion carries. Please note that you must, sorry, I'm going to find my language here.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. This is a difficult one, and I appreciate it. And we have to recognize that you come before boards for variances because you have practical difficulties and hardships that are unique conditions. And I appreciate all the effort and your energy put into this. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Hey, Carl and Kelvin and Heidi, as a condition of these motions, I do need more information on the new person doors and the new windows on the addition.
Yep, send me
So-
as long as an email as you want, and I will provide you all the information, okay?
It won't be long.
I know.
Thank you.
And you know I'll give it to you.
All right, we actually need to take a 5-minute recess. The Zoom is not working, so we need to take care of some
Everybody-
technical difficulties.
Take 5.
Thank you very much.
order from our recess. We are on hearing F3, 530 North Division. Ms. Thatcher, when you're ready, will you please give the staff report?
Okay. All right, 1 second while the
Thank you, everyone,
PowerPoint
for your
opens.
patience.
So back in the magical month of April 2020, there was an application to approve a replacement building, a redo of an existing building with a big addition in the old Fourth Ward Historic District on this building. The applicant came into a working session or two, and I'm thinking it may have even gone to a meeting once, but then COVID hit and the application was live, and we realized after missing both the March and April HTC meetings, which were canceled, we had 2 or 3 outstanding applications, and those we dealt with by seeing if anybody had any issues with them, and then letting them be approved after the end of the 60-day period by taking no action, because no serious issues were raised at that time. So this application does have a certificate of appropriateness. It was earlier than that deemed to be a non-contributing structure. Anyway, it's 2 structures that were glommed together a long time ago and made into, this just one mega building here. And so we've got an approved plan for modifying this building, putting an addition on the back, making it the greenest building in a large radius. And Doug can tell you a little more about that if he wants to. But after that certificate of appropriateness was issued, the team working on this took some of the comments that they heard from the commission to heart and made some modifications. And those are what are here tonight to be discussed. And in a nutshell, I borrowed some of Doug's application slides here. This is the front of the existing building on a much nicer summer day. And here's what it looks like today and the back today. This on the top, the red and yellow buildings are what was approved in March of 2020. And you can see the addition here in the back. You can see that the roof line is modified. There's tons of solar panels up here. There are shed dormers on both sides, and the windows have been changed. Again, this is not a contributing building, so this was all good. And the thing that the HTC commented on specifically, one of them was this stairwell going down here, because having this big guardrail in the front yard wasn't ideal. So it was redesigned by sinking part of this front corner of the yard and putting up a low retaining wall and a bunch of landscaping here in order to make this guardrail system go away. So the way it works now, and this is the money slide with the site plan and the rendering of what it would look like here, or this is what it used to look like here on the left. But you would walk toward the front door, 2 steps down to this slightly sunken patio, and then a few more steps down underneath the front porch. So guardrails, handrails are hidden underneath the porch. This surface Doug can tell you a little bit more about, but there is a stone wall akin to the stone wall that is outside of the church down the street, St. Andrew's. This gives them patio space for the tenants to use. It's not typical to have a sunken front yard. I can think of 2 in the Old West Side that have been approved in the last 5 or 6 years. One's on the corner of Mosley and 2nd, and one is at the corner of 7th and West Jefferson. That was a big new house with the whole side yard was sunken. That was the most recent one. So here's a view from the street of what it would look like. You can see the wall here. It's at its, let's see, this is 2 feet here. So the wall itself above grade looks like it's even less than 2 feet tall, though it does step around. And the entry would be right over here. Here's a drawing showing sort of a section, a side view of here would be the wall. From the inside, this would be at its tallest point, and the sidewalk is here. The site slopes downhill, going to the north quite substantially. There are a couple of other things that are included in this application. The top was what was approved, and the bottom is what is proposed. Some window changes, both on the existing part and on the new addition. None of these even give me pause because, again, it's a non-contributing building and it's very close to what was approved the first time around. Here's the north side elevation, same thing, some window changes. Maybe Doug can comment. It does look like the rear addition is shallower than it used to be, but when we get to you, Doug, you can talk about that because there used to be like 3-4 windows across, and now there's one in the center of just the new addition on the back from the north. Let's see, and here's another view of what the front looks like. Okay, that's it for my presentation. I'm going to turn it back to the chair. I did comment briefly that I think that this work is appropriate. I do prefer it to having this big stairwell going down in the front. I don't think that that's a good or an appropriate look. And well, I wouldn't, if this were a contributing structure, I probably would not be very much in favor at all of a sunken patio in a front yard. But given its location kind of at the end of the row, the district sort of peters out behind it. And I'm really okay with this rework as proposed. And I do appreciate the team's attempt to get rid of that big guardrail in the front yard. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Thatcher. Commissioner Quijano and myself were on the review committee. I can go ahead and start on this one. So I generally agree with staff. I think one of the most, we were looking mostly at this front entrance modification, right? Because that's really the house, I think, from one of the images in the packet that we'll probably get to in the presentation by the applicant, shows the footprint. I believe it is slightly forward a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Is it?
I didn't mention that the house is shifting a little bit
Right.
on its foundation to be more parallel to the street and to fit on the lot better. But that should have been in there too.
I think it's on page 37 in the PDF, but there's a footprint of the old and like a crosshatch with a heavy dashed line that's showing the new. So the plane of the front wall is shifting forward slightly, not, I think, almost an insignificant difference for this conversation. That, like Ms. Thatcher said, the big change is really that front yard space. The slope that is existing does the sidewalk and street, start to really slope toward the north quite significantly across the property. I don't have an issue with the retaining wall. I think that's proposed. It looks like it's at a decent height. There were other houses around in the same area that also have retaining walls. We've seen these on a few properties just in the front yard. It looks like there is going to be a little bit of a buffer in between the retaining wall and the sidewalk, so a planting buffer. I think one of the only kind of questions or comments we discussed was what is the surface of that patio, because it does seem to take up quite a bit of the front yard space, and that was really I think the main concern from our point of view. So finding out what that surface is and how it works with the overall net zero, and if there's any other additional greenery planned for that space in particular. Commissioner Quijano.
I really don't have much more to add to the comments made by our chair and the information presented by staff. It's really just understanding the impact of, in my mind, the impact of that change to the front yard portion as a non-contributing building in the district.
Thank you. Okay, so I will now turn it over to Mr. Selby. Do you have access to share your presentation? Or
Yes, I believe I
Okay.
do. Shoot, for some reason it's not pulling it though. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, can you see that?
Sort of. You may need to zoom in on very distinct areas when you're talking about them, because the monitors
Okay.
we see are on the opposite side of the room.
Okay.
Anybody wants,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to get up and stand under the monitors, there's no reason you can't do that.
Oh man, I just lost it too. Okay, sorry, I probably should have just come in. I kind of thought that it was not really happening down at the city hall yet. So
You're fine. Go ahead. We can see, and if we need to get up and go over there, we can.
Okay, well, obviously, I believe Jill showed this slide here, which is what had passed and what it is now versus what had passed in March of 2020. Yeah, I would say that we really did when the suggestion was made to get rid of the guardrail. Well, the only reason it was there is because we thought we had to enter from the driveway, which the driveway goes up kind of the terrain is falling in two directions here, so it's falling down as you go down the sidewalk and it's falling as you come down the driveway. So I think in some ways this drawing on the right might be a little deceiving, is that it looks deeper than it probably would be, but that's mostly because we were coming from the driveway side, and we had to abide with the code, the requirements that we have a guardrail over 30 inches tall, but nonetheless, when we came back, Shannon Gibrandel and Kathy Keeneth, Sadashiv and myself got together and said, what can we do? And it really came down to how do we get to the point of being able to traverse around down to this to the underground part. The commissioners had asked for us to remove the stairs or move the stairs to no further south than the corner of the building, which is sort of where you see that handrail on return on the left. And then also to get rid of the handrail. So we were kind of excited about it because we not only moved the stairs all the way, we actually were able to move them all the way to the porch wall. And so they're completely hidden and there is no handrail now. It also solved some other issues in terms of, just allowing more daylight into that area and sort of having the garden apartment be something that's, just it's got a little bit of outdoor space that helps with the living building challenge aspect of the project, because you're supposed to give people access to outdoors and sort of spaces like that to hang out and to enjoy the natural areas around. One of the things that Shannon had done in her part of the design is to incorporate quite a bit of landscaping around, which a lot of which is required by the program details, but kind of being sensitive to the fact that we needed to kind of shield that area and make it work. The north part, going north from the porch is all extensively landscaped. Actually, the south part there is too. It's got a buffer pretty much all the way around it except for the actual walkway. I also would say that this is a total of 9 feet from the front of the porch to the start of the landscaping. So it's a pretty small area to begin with. One of our sort of ideals in that was to borrow from the church up the street. We're going to have some cut stone from the actual project. The foundation is 100% sunk into the ground right now, but there is an area in the rear that has some cut stone. So we thought, well, gosh, it'd be really nice to reuse that on the site and then and do a nice masonry wall like you see at St. Andrew's Church. And the other thing was just kind of these little areas to pause off of the sidewalk, kind of a transition zone between public and private spheres. And also, being that that particular location has some terrain changes too. So how they dealt with, with sort of the lower areas going down into, sort of the lower areas versus going kind of up into the church itself. Those were the kind of the things that we used to call on to help this design. I think Jill showed you this slide. It is 2 risers down to the sunken area there. That is a total of 9 feet from the house to the front. So again, not a huge area, but a little bit more generous than if you just had to make a pathway. There was really no way to get to the point of not needing a handrail somewhere unless we at least brought this down. So we brought it down to the minimum amount we could to be able to lose the handrail entirely. I had designed this surface below to be a exposed aggregate concrete. I typically have used that for sort of outdoor areas where stone or patio pavers aren't used. The reason I like it, and especially in this context, is the aggregate we use in it is a granite pea stone, these fine pea stone pebbles. And once you wash the cream, concrete cream off and oil those pebbles, they look a lot like they're the same material as the granite of the block. So you get that kind of that nice colorful surface, very earthy in tone and texture, which I thought would go really great with the stone, which is a multicolored stone. So you'll kind of get that multicolor effect in the pea stone itself. I'm not married to that, but that's just kind of what we came up with as the design team and thought that would look nice there. There is, this area does not perk on the site. There is a part in the back that does. So we are required to have a drain in this area that goes out to the driveway with the drain that comes down there. So there's this and a small area of the driveway go into the storm sewer, which is right at the edge of the property there. And then, but about 90 to 95% of the water that falls on the site actually will be infiltrated in the back. So this area is just a little too low for that. But it's a very small amount by the volume on the total lot. Yeah, I made this slide just to kind of, I think the pictures can be a little deceiving. It's really not that far above the sidewalk. And in fact, the north side of the sidewalk is even a foot lower than what the lowest part or the lower part of the entry is. It's in total at the highest point of the sidewalk to the entry area, the sunken entry area, is just under 2 feet. And so from the outside, you'll see walking down the sidewalk, you'll see a low wall. On the inside, it's probably something that somebody could kind of lean on or sit on, and it would be about the right height for people to kind of congregate and sit or lean on the wall. What I also thought was just that the height difference from even walking down the sidewalk to somebody in there is not great. So I don't think it'll be very jarring from a standpoint of being like several feet down or anything like that. This was really just the slide was to say that there's so much. The neighborhood in general is pretty flat, and so this is an area with some terrain, and those areas with terrain, there's a variety of different ways that those are kind of dealt with. This is directly across the street, the Flatiron Building. They kind of had the same condition. They had an area where they needed to. They had the parking is about 6 feet lower. This is just a concrete wall to protect people from falling over the edge to the parking area below. That is paved. There's also right off of the sidewalk, it goes down a few steps into a lower entry area there too. Not out of context in the immediate area for another non-contributing structure. The only difference being is that this one kind of enlivens the street scene a little bit, so it's not so much like here's a wall to protect the property from the sidewalk and vice versa, but in our case, it's more like here's natural materials that match other things in the neighborhood, and create their own environment of enjoyment for the people who live there. Yeah, we did make some changes to the property. One of the ones that I think worked out better is that we thickened up the sections between the floors and have a little bit of a ceiling that's raised inside there. The changes were partially required by fire code, but in the end, I think it looked real similar to what we had originally passed. The windows changed because the layout in the inside had to change as a result of moving those the structure, moving it the entry down. We changed the inside and made the social space, the common areas of the house, all towards the front. And so what you see there in the middle, in the bump out and above that, that's the kitchen and all those units. So what you're seeing is the windows that are over the sink, which is, I find common in, you know, sort of the older houses, is that the windows over the sink have to be a little shorter in order to have a counter height there, but the rest of them are meant to be kind of taller and skinnier and less window to wall ratio like you would see commonly in older homes. The north elevation doesn't get really seen very much because you're kind of heading up the hill and it's the opposite direction of the street. One of the things that happened as a result of COVID was that when it first hit, nobody knew what was going to happen, and the bank said, hey, guess what? We're not going to be financing any student rentals for a while. Nobody even knew if people were going to be going to school anymore for a little while. So that took about a year to resolve that and be able to get this financed again. But in the meantime, as we all know, construction costs have gone through the roof. And so one of the ways I've kind of dealt with that and been able to do that without sacrificing a lot of the deep green perspectives of a net positive energy house and all of the extensive rebuilding of infrastructure that I have to do, not only on this property, but also in the street, out in the street, was to go modular. When I was working with Meadowlark, we designed and built the nation's first LEED Platinum modular home east of California anyway. And so I work closely with a company, or I have on several projects, and kind of know how to design in this fashion. It's a great quality building, and they are able to alter their construction methods to allow this to be built in that fashion. And due to the time savings and some of the money savings on this, I was able to bring the project, I wouldn't say back to where it was, but somewhere in alignment where I could still actually get it financed. But as a result, one of the sections in the back had to grow to the rear a little bit in order to be able to fit in with how those items are built. Some minor changes to the front, due to the change in layout. The 3 windows in the front no longer worked in that layout. But we actually again thought that might be a little bit of an advantage just because it wasn't so matchy and provided a little bit of context between the homes, a little bit of distinction anyway. We also had the roof lines go from 10 and 12 to 12 and 12, which better matched the buildings on the street that were being compared to. I think I have a slide coming up for that. Actually, I'll just go to that slide here. So the proposed slide down on the bottom, this is what it is in the front, and this is what it is below. I always kind of thought, you know, the low slung nature of this house and how it really doesn't match the patterns of the other house, it kind of reminded me of a broken front tooth. So what we tried to do with the new one was to match the dormer pitches and the 12 and 12 pitches you see commonly on the block, and then also, you know, just sort of the heights of the homes. So something that would make it match a little better than what it does currently. We did go through the HTC principles for building new structures in a historic district, and these are them. So maintaining the existing spacing for front and side yard setbacks along the block as seen from the street, and this slide was referred to. This yellow line here, all of these houses match up pretty well, and then you get to this house, and it was kind of twisted on the lot, and I think, probably the original home that was there was probably a little bit turned, and then when they moved the other house on, just kind of crammed them together or whatever. It's got a significant twist to it, and if you, there are a few orientation points where you're like, that house doesn't kind of line up. So we did turn it to match all the buildings to the south in terms of its alignment to the street, and then also squared it up to the street. And then going to the north is the Cornwall Mansion, where it changes considerably, and kind of, as Jill said, it kind of, the historic district kind of peters out there, or at least changes form. So we thought this was actually an improvement to it, because it brings it more in line with the other homes on the block. Not only in terms of the massing and the building height and the roof lines and things like that, but also how it's aligned to the street. The next item was orienting the front of the house towards the street and clearly identifying the front door. So we have a traditional porch on the front. It clearly identifies the front door and a porch to the street. I think probably better than it does now, which is almost kind of like a deck-like appearance on the front, with some kind of strange little gables over the each door that were actually a porch column that was cut off at a 45-degree angle. I can kind of tell that building was put together in 1929, because it looked like they just grabbed whatever they could find and kind of built it on the building. But it doesn't have a lot of rhyme or reason. And the materials are less than desirable in some regards. I did want to make a note down here on the front of the properties across the street, which are set back a little bit, but they have some paved areas and some areas that are just, cars pulling up and parking on several of the houses across the street. That comes into play in a little bit here. The third point for appropriate was designing a new front facade that's similar in scale and proportion to the other contributing buildings. And, again, that's kind of this slide here. I think it's much more in scale and more in context with the neighborhood as you go down the street, and certainly around generally in the Old Fourth Ward. Placement, scaling, spacing, orientation of windows and doors. We tried real hard to give this building a historical context in that regard with our window placement, and I don't think that's out of alignment there in any way. Probably a little better than what it is, than what it is right now for sure. Selecting materials and finishes that are compatible with historic materials and finishes found in surrounding contributing buildings. As we went down here, this will be lap siding that is of a character that you would find commonly in the area. We're going to be setting the windows into the window openings a little bit to give them a little bit more texture. There will be all the trim that you would see normally on an old house. So a nice big beefy trim and a well-made sort of exterior that has context with the other homes in the neighborhood, or a home that was built of this era. Using a wood-based trim. I have tried really, really hard to find antique clapboard siding. I've looked all over Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. Nobody seems to have it. I've talked to all the salvage people for old houses. It's just not something that people salvage. I'm pretty certain that what I'll find on the house when we pull the 3 layers of siding off is that underlying all that, the existing clapboards are going to have a lot of nails in them. I've worked with old siding quite a lot in my career, and it splits very easily when nails are driven through it. And we've got 2 layers of asphalt and then vinyl over that, so there's going to be quite a lot of nails that were driven through it. But nonetheless, even if I could save a good share of it, it's a small amount of what I would need, maybe enough to do one side, maybe even one half of another side. But there is no way that I'll find a material to replace the rest of it. I just can't find it. And I would love to use an antique material there. I love old siding. I even like working with it. But it just does not seem to be able to be had. Last one was placing utility connections at the rear or other location that minimize visibility from the street. All of that is going underground. The only thing that will be visible from the street is required by the fire code to have a fire, what do you call it, the thing that they tap into on the front of the house and a strobe, so that will go off in the event of a fire. This does need to be sprinklered. So there was one area that said not appropriate, and that's paving a high percentage of the front yard or otherwise disrupting the landscape patterns within front yards. So I just did want to say that while, the front area to the south, like I said, is 9 feet, and that will be paved, I could skinny that up in some ways and make it more of like a walkway that would still retain, keep the handrail out of there, but this just does so many nice things for it, and I really, in my heart of hearts, I'm like, this isn't really that much lower than the sidewalk, so I think that cut stone wall on the outside is going to look amazing, and it will be pretty well in context with the neighborhood, at least up the street. But if you look here, we've just got landscaping all through here, and the north side is completely landscaped. So there's just going to be this nice green buffer around everywhere, and the materials will be natural looking materials. When I look at the immediate context of the area, again, I'm seeing a lot of parking out in front and things like that, and I know that's not, what the HTC would like to see, but it is what's there. The other non-contributing structure across the street, the Flatiron building, has a similar context in that it is almost 100% paved with that same concrete wall out front. The only difference being is that that's made for cars, not for people. So we've done our best to soften this up and to minimize it while still getting all the advantages of losing the handrail in front entirely and giving the occupants of the building something that they can really enjoy. So I think that in terms of the context of the neighborhood, I felt like it does fit. There is some things that are rhyming with St. Andrew's Church up the block. We are doing an extensive landscaping job to try and make this something that looks as good as it's going to function, and it will certainly be better for the people who live there. So that's kind of where we're at. I'd like to build this. At this point, I'm going to be looking at starting in June of 2023. I have to build it on the academic calendar, but I hope for the opportunity to be able to build this building. I'm kind of at the point of whether this is going to go forward or not. I bought this building. My wife and I bought this building 22 years ago. I bought it knowing that at some point in the future it was going to need an extensive project. It's structurally very deficient, and I would like to do something significant with it that has a much better goal in the project than just to put up a building that people can live in. So, this will be net positive energy. It's an all-electric, solar-powered home. We've designed it to have ultra-low water use. It is designed to fit the neighborhood context. We made that hyphen in the back even because the original home had the footprint of that red home you see there, and probably wasn't really all that different in appearance, at least in some regard in terms of the roof lines and things like that. We believe it vastly beautifies the streetscape on Division Street. This has strong support of the Old Fourth Ward Neighborhood Association. It'll be a well-built building for many lifetimes, provides a better living space for tenants. It's also going to be a kind of a shining star of the city's 2030 goals for what they are looking for housing. And student rental housing is by far and away the worst performing class of buildings when it comes to sustainability in the city, by a long shot. And I'm actually have a meeting with the city tomorrow to talk about how can we green our student rental stock. And what this part of the goal of this is to show people is that you can invest. Some would say over-invest in a property on the front end, but I believe that if we can do this right, that it'll return dividends for a long time. It may take a lot longer to pay off, but in the end, it's going to be something that's ready for the next 100 years and not something that's going to need to be retrofit in the future, and something that is much more comfortable, much healthier, using sustainable materials. It just really is something that I strongly believe is an important example for what can happen when you take the long-term view in building, especially things like income properties. I will be replacing city infrastructure out on the street at no cost to taxpayers, and the tax man is going to be making a lot more on us from this building than what we're currently paying on the existing structure. So I think in all of those contexts, this is a much more appropriate building for the neighborhood, both in looks and in function. And I hope that the Historic District Commissioners will see it the same and grant a certificate of appropriateness. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for your thorough presentation and giving us all a refresher on the project, the materials, the composition, and the modifications. It's good to see it again. Just as a reminder, the commissioners, the project does have a certificate of appropriateness, so we're really just looking at some of the major modifications, and if there are any issues with changes in materials or window placement, I don't think there's any issues with any of those, but mostly the front yard is the majority of where the change occurs in terms of that front sunken yard and the guardrail. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Sure.
Doug, when you spoke earlier about the proposed concrete treatment and the aesthetics of it, that was really the message that I heard, that you were proposing this solid concrete paved surface in that front portion of the yard that's sunken. But I apologize if I missed it, but I didn't hear that there was like a performance or some sort of water issue reason for the solid concrete that's going in. It was more of an aesthetic decision, is that correct?
Yes, I have to put a drain in this area regardless, even if I was to do any type of pavement materials, because it doesn't perk here. So even pavers, even pervious pavers and things like that still aren't going to infiltrate water to the city standards, or really what I would want there, seeing as, the last thing you want is a pond in that area. The materials were not selected from a water management perspective, but more from an aesthetic perspective. That is correct.
Okay.
The water will be managed through a drain in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rockland?
Okay, so I'd like to hear some more, I guess, a reiteration of the benefits of the cut stone wall that you're proposing. And I'm asking that because, like, we had the guardrail, which seemed out of place. But the yard was sort of going to be left as is. I mean, we didn't see maybe a landscape plan, but the yard was not going to be sunken. And we said, can you move the guardrail north of the south elevation of the wall? And then, so the guardrail went away, but now we've got a sunken yard and a very long cut stone wall. So I guess I just want to hear again, like, tell me again, like, what are the benefits to the project of having, like, okay, so we have to get down to the area below, and there's a couple ways to do it. So in the way you're proposing now, what is the benefit of going to the sunken yard with the wall to the overall project? Because, like, I kind of see it like 6 of one, half dozen of the other, where we had a guardrail, now we have a wall, and we can still get down to underneath the porch. But are there other benefits that that wall is providing the project? And can you explain those again, please?
Sure. We always were going to need a wall alongside the driveway, and that's just for egress on the side. That's going to be a code requirement.
Okay.
Honestly, the cut stone wall was purely aesthetic because we thought, there's precedent in the neighborhood for it, and we thought it would look beautiful. Regardless of what we needed to do, in order to get rid of the handrail entirely, what we needed to do is to come down 2 steps off of the walkway to the porch. And that was, so that was really what allowed us to get by without having anywhere where we don't need any railing at all, in order to get down to the lower part without, and still being able to meet code. We tried to keep that as minimal as possible because we didn't want to create something that looked, out of place or considerably lower. For instance, when across the street, when you're walking by, you can kind of peer over that wall and look down 6 feet. There's no other way for them to do it. I understand why that's there, but in our case, we were like, how can we turn that into a benefit for the occupants and something that activates the streetscape? And that's something the city has been real in favor of, is bring people out into the, onto porches and things like that. So it was meeting city goals. It was meeting goals of the lower garden apartment, having an area to be able to enjoy the outside, like every other floor of the building does. And these are flat, so each level is its own apartment. And so we thought, gosh, this is a really nice area for them to be able to enjoy a sunny day, maybe even do a barbecue, something like that. So, the 2 choices we really had were to come off of the driveway or to come off of the front. And coming off of the front, as we are in the revised plan, allows it so that we really only have to come down 2 steps off of that. And because the terrain is falling there, I mean, if the terrain was flat in that area, you would barely even notice it at all. It's only because the sidewalk is going up that it becomes evident that that area is a little bit lower. But it's like, maybe up to your knee in terms of the total height difference from the sidewalk. So we just felt like it was a minimal change. We used the cut stone wall to provide precedent because, we liked the way that they kind of did it in the church up the street. And because we had to deal with that terrain in some way if we wanted to get rid of the handrail.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yep, no, that was what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
I have a question, actually. So you stated 9 feet from the front of the house to the cut stone wall? That's correct?
Yeah, well, it's 9 feet to, let me see, hold on one second. I think that might be to the porch.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point of clarification. I think on page 37 I think it's on that slide where you had the yellow line indicating the shift.
Yes.
So yeah, I see 11 3/4 porch setback and then 18.
Okay. Yeah, so it's 16, I thought. Let me blow that up a little bit. Oh, crap. Okay, so this drawing is a little bit in error because the wall is all the way out to the sidewalk in this case. And we brought it inboard so that we could have some plantings there.
Okay.
And we're able to lose a step going up to the porch. So it's 9 feet from the front of the porch to the outside of the wall, let's say, the streetscape side of the wall. And then it is, there is the porch is 6.5 feet, I believe, so it'd be, let's see, 9 feet plus 6.5 feet. I'm not great at math on the spot.
About 16.
Call it 16 feet, yeah. All of these houses are pretty close to the street on the east side.
Mm-hmm. So then what does that leave approximately for your landscape buffer? Is it about 2 feet, maybe?
2 feet.
1.5 feet?
Yep.
Okay. And then, so is this plan show approximately the, where the wall will sit in adjacency to the driveway? So So it looks like
Yes.
it's also approximately 2 feet, so just kind of gauging the overall patio size.
Yes, it's 3 feet from the driveway.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the driveway has to, one of the reasons we needed a small railing on the wall going up near the side entry was because the way the driveway has to curve in, we became less than 3 feet for a short distance. But that's up the side a little bit. And so, yeah, so that's 3 feet on the side and 2 feet in the front.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. I'm going to open this up for public hearing. If there's a member of the public that would like to speak on the item at 530 North Division, you have up to 3 minutes to speak about this application. Kristen, do we have any callers?
There are no callers.
We'll close the public hearing. Is there a commissioner that would like to make a motion on the application? Commissioner Fortner.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 530 North Division Street, a non-contributing property in the Old Fourth Ward Historic District, to alter the previously approved lower front entrance by constructing a front patio with a cut stone retaining wall, slightly realign the structure to be parallel to the street, make minor window modifications, and composite lap cladding on the front and fiber cement board cladding on the rear wing of the building as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular Standards 9 and 10, and the guidelines for district or neighborhood setting, as well as the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines, particularly as they pertain to all new construction and new construction in historic residential settings.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Fortner, seconded by Commissioner White. Is there discussion on the motion? I can start off. I think in general, the majority of the modifications to the structure itself are completely within our guidelines. I appreciate just they're looking once again at proportioning and window sizing and door placements and whatnot, but I think those are kind of insignificant in the overall scheme of the modifications. As in, I think they're slight enough that they still fall within the guidelines. There's the last page of the presentation in the packet gives a little bit of that perspective view of, I think, that sunken porch area, which I think is interesting to see, because initially when we were on site, it seems like it's a lot of yard space to sort of pave over, and it is, I would say a paved front yard is more out of character for a historic district. But I think, looking at this condition and the landscape buffer and the site wall, and the height of the site wall is relatively minor. It's not out, the site wall itself is not out of character. I think this perspective for me, I think, is interesting in that it does start to, I think, indicate that that sense of a lively front space, and almost has some resonance to, like a more of a modern city block that has a lower stoop outside of a front door that may be an activated space, which this is kind of a transitional zone. Again, it may be a little bit outside of character for, this, particular area, but I don't think it's completely outside of character for the project and its use to activate the front yard.
Ready to vote?
If any other commissioners have any other comments or thoughts?
I had a quick question for the record from Doug. That's sort of not necessarily pertaining, but I wanted to ask him before we were finished here, because I think overall it is important. And I just was curious, from the applicant if the project is still looking for Living Building Challenge or FIA certification. I just think we should all be curious from the Historic District.
Yes, I am seeking both on this project.
Okay.
It would be the first multifamily building in the world to achieve both, and also the first modular building period to achieve Living Building Challenge certification.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we ready for a vote? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All of those opposed, please say no. All right, your motion carries. The application has been approved, and please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All through with hearings, on to new business. There is no new business.
There is.
Is there?
There is new business. We have Htc Retreat Scheduling. So, the Htc Annual Retreat takes place in the spring on a Saturday morning from about 9 to noon. We move it around to different places, locations, and we need to work on choosing a date for that. Commissioner White has kindly presented me with a list of his choices or his availability, and we're looking at late March or April. By the time it gets to May, nobody wants to be indoors on a Saturday morning for a half day to look at slides and things. So between now and then, we've got 6 or 7 Saturday mornings. If Saturday morning just doesn't work completely for somebody, just say so. Otherwise, we will continue talking about Saturday. Okay. I will throw out March 26th and April 2 because it's spring break week, and I will not be available.
Okay.
That's critical.
This leaves, the earliest date is March 19, which is a little quick for me because that's like a week from Saturday, and I'm not sure I can pull it together that quickly.
I'm out of town.
Okay, Dave's out of town. So I would like to propose possibly April 16. Anybody have any
No objections?
hang-ups on the 16th? I'm so excited that you're all here, too. First time in a long time.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe we just
We can actually do this.
book it.
Does anyone have a date they would prefer instead of the 16th? The 9th or the 23rd are other candidates.
I'd say the 9th or the 16th
Yeah.
would work for me.
Okay. 9th or 16th is Jess? Okay. Hearing no arguments, I would like to try to find us a place to hold this on April 16.
Okay.
9 a.m. to noon.
Place with heat.
Place with heat would be nice. You sure? Continuing on this line of thought, do any of you have a favorite place to hold it? We generally go to a park or a historic building. Bob, you've been to a few of these. Do you have a favorite? Does anyone else have any suggestions?
Well, Burns Park would be good, retirement.
Yeah, the senior center? Yeah,
The Hideaway was nice.
That was a nice space. The Hideaway was nice, yeah. That was where we had the last one in person.
Oh, that was, yeah. March 20th.
I'm fine.
Yeah, days
Was that
before the
like
shutdown.
the second week of March 2020 we had that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna write down
Before we knew what was coming.
Park and the Hideaway.
What's the address?
Of Hathaway's Hideaway?
Yeah.
No, it's a few doors down from Fleetwood.
Oh,
Yep.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. Okay, I will check on those two places and see what's available on the 16th. And then I had put together a very brief list of possible topics. to talk about at the retreat. We usually, this is any ideas that you guys have that you think we would benefit from a discussion as a whole, outside of a meeting where it's a little more relaxed. It is a meeting and the public can show up if they want to, but it's just more informal and easier to have a conversation than, yelling down the line here. So a couple of ideas that I had were, just a second, let me get my Duo to work. Okay. There was a canceled application at this meeting, and I don't think that this would be as long of a discussion as I thought after the review committee walked out of this site at 808 West Washington on Monday. But we were discussing what to do with second-generation wood windows, meaning historic house, got some window replacements that are necessary. They replace them with replicas, with or without weight and pulley and stuff like that. But now it's 20 years later and those windows have failed. Do we make them replicate the replicas? Or do we just go with window worksheet tolerances? Again, I don't want to discuss this right now, but is that something that you think would be
Yeah.
worth a 15-minute conversation?
Yeah.
I would appreciate the guidance. Another thing we could possibly talk about is Preservation Month. The HTC Awards Committee is not meeting again this year. In February, when they had to make a call about whether or not to go out and look at houses and everything, they said, no, we're not comfortable cramming into a van for a van tour. We're not going to throw a big party, stuff like that. And that's all the fun stuff. So they had suggested, a couple of them, that we sort of have a best of the last 20, 25 years of awards slideshow presentation on the city website. And I can do something like that. But that begs the question, do we want a better web presence? Are there things that we could be doing that I'm not doing or that we're overlooking? Or is it worth discussing our digital presence as a commission, or is that not necessary? That's another, do you want to talk about it? Or would you rather save the time for actual preservation topics?
If we have time on the agenda, I would not put that high on the agenda. If you had, let's say you finish at 10:30, I'm willing to talk about that.
Jill, if we have ideas coming out of that brainstorming session, is there any budget or resources to implement any changes to the website?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, Kristen Vanderlucht and I pretty much maintain the website.
Okay.
Kristen pretty much maintains the website. I occasionally go in and add or subtract things. But, we have city communications people. We have Twitter accounts. We have, there's probably a city Instagram. I don't know. And it might be minor things, like just getting our name out there once in a while, or it might be a major thing, like having our own dedicated stream of information going out to the public. Kristen is in favor of this, she says. So maybe I'll just leave that as a question mark for now, and you guys can mull over it. And always, if you have ideas, just send them to me anyway. We don't have to wait for a working session or a retreat. Two things that we have to do, that we always do, are we have to do an annual work plan and bylaw review. That's usually a 15-minute discussion of the work plan. And then there's the annual review of projects, which I think that you all like and get something out of, where we show pictures of things that have actually been built, that have been approved. So we can kind of compare the drawings to what really happened, and it helps to get everybody, give them a better sense of, here's what you're going to get based on these drawings. So that's a pretty lightweight agenda. So I would love if any of you have ideas.
I thought we had a project earlier this year where we were talking about egress windows, the egress window issues. was a rental property in the 4th Ward, I think.
Was it basement egress?
Yeah, basement egress, I'm sorry, basement egress windows.
Was it, did it, yeah, I kind of remember this, about the placement of windows?
Yeah, they were, they wanted
Yes,
to
yes, we had-
make the ones that were very close to the front.
Yes, we had 2 of those applications right in a row, or together, and they were both inappropriate. I do remember that.
That, did the guidelines need to be
Yeah.
reviewed and updated?
Yeah, that would be a good succinct thing to tackle, is to look at the guidelines for egress windows in the design guidelines document and make sure they're still what we want. And that would tie in nicely with the annual review of projects, because I'll probably be showing some egress windows and, yeah. All right, anybody else?
It's not a new topic, but as part of the review of projects that we've approved, Anna had mentioned, I don't remember the address, it's on 7th. There's like a blue and white house, blue and white house that had an addition put on the back, kind of cleaned up some previous additions. I haven't been by it since you mentioned that, but kind of understanding the realities of what we approved.
What we're approving.
Little-
Scale.
Yeah, sense of scale.
Yeah, I don't, I'll write that down here to
I'll try to look up the
include
address.
that
Yeah, I
blue
can-
house on 7th.
That blue
It's,
house.
In the slideshow.
it's a few past 7th and Liberty.
Yeah, it's on the west side. I know
Yep.
exactly which one you mean.
Yeah.
Has a little bit of gingerbread on the front.
We
There's
may
one-
have,
One house south of the corner of Huron
yes, no,
or Liberty?
Liberty.
Okay. That was Connie Rizzolo Brown
Yeah, that's pretty good.
project.
Good memory.
I think we looked at it at one retreat at the end very quickly, but they weren't, it wasn't completed.
Yeah, I think it was maybe just framed out or
Yeah.
partially, or, yeah, okay. All right, I'll keep that in the slideshow.
I know we had a list, maybe from, I don't know if it was from a previous retreat, or I guess it maybe would have been one of the ones that we did online. Were we able to cover everything that was on that list?
I will check.
I know there are other things that have come up, but nothing's coming to mind at the moment.
Are there any lessons learned or anything we want to review about the gas meter? Working with the utility? Or are we done? They coming out of the whole west side?
We're not quite done with them, but it's all going swimmingly. It's just been a gas, sorry. Well, I should probably be talking into my mic so that when Mia's recording this, she can hear it. Do any of you feel like you need to know more about meters? And Dave's saying no.
No.
Said enough. Okay. Well, if anyone thinks of any other topics, just let me know. And I'll fill these in for now, and I think that'll be plenty.
When do you have to publish that agenda?
A week before, something
Okay.
like that.
So if we
Yeah.
have other things at the next,
Yeah, we can still
meeting?
talk at the next meeting. Yep,
Okay.
yep. I'll ask you for more ideas then.
we'll have one before then, right? Oh, it'll be right before then.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all very much.
Is that it for new business?
That's it for new business.
Okay.
Yep.
On to minutes. There
I didn't get to
was,
February.
I think Mia just emailed those out today, so
yeah, it came.
we can wait on those, or,
Just give me a copy next month.
okay.
Was anyone able to review the minutes?
I'll review the January.
I think I just got I only got the February. Maybe I didn't see the January.
You only got February, but not
Yeah.
January?
Maybe I didn't, maybe I missed it.
Do you guys, have enough of you seen the minutes, and are you comfortable with them, or would you like to wait until next month for January and/or February?
I saw the January minutes, reviewed them, and they look fine, yeah.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then why don't
But I
you guys
think we just saw the January ones, Anna. I don't,
I think she emailed February, right,
Oh,
at the, whenever.
like
the-
today or yesterday?
This
Yeah.
afternoon, right before the meeting, yeah.
We'll do the
So we can-
February next month.
Okay, so January meeting minutes, any corrections or anything? Okay, so January meeting minutes are approved. We will review February next month.
Okay, great. Quick shout out to Mia. She dealt with all sorts of technical and other difficulties that I had with this week's packet, so if you see her, tell her thanks. She's keeping this ship afloat.
How about that? All right, item I, reports from commissioners. Is there a commissioner that would like to share something with the commission? Nope. All right. Item J, assignments for the review committee on Monday. What is that date going to be?
April 11 at
11th,
5
yeah.
PM.
5 p.m.
Yep, daylight savings. It's this weekend.
Man, I can do that one.
You can do that one, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other volunteers?
I might be able to do it.
Well, just wait 1 minute. Again, you've got a lot saved up in the bank.
Okay, that's true, yeah. Who else would like to do it?
April 11th.
April 11th at 5 PM. Are
Monday.
you available?
I will make myself, I will do that.
Oh, great.
Okay, great, great. Thank you.
Tour Ann Arbor. Okay, on to item K, reports from staff.
All right, so
Staff activities?
The February staff activities, I don't know if there's a partial one in there or not. It's missing like 50 applications from DTE because the city is moving to our new permit tracking system. I know I've kind of mentioned this before, but it's actually happening next week. So people will no longer be able to hand me a paper copy of an application or email it to me. They will have to go online and enter all the information in themselves, which will vastly cut down on staff time, not just me, but Mia and the front desk and everybody else. And they'll be able to pay online as well, which is another huge bonus for us. We have not yet figured out how to get reports out of it. That's sort of not been a priority to date. So we'll move that up on the list for next month. And I will, or Kristen probably will, be adding to the HDC website and the other city websites instructions on how to use that, how to get into it, what to put where, what details I need, and how to pay. So that's kind of exciting and will be a big change.
Does that replace eTrack-It, or is it
Yes.
separate from eTrack-It?
It replaces it. eTrack-It will still be available for viewing, but no new projects or permits will go into it after next week.
What's the name of the system?
The exterior, the external to the public, it will be called Stream. And internally, we call it Energov,
I-N or E-N?
Energov. All right,
Okay.
all good?
Yeah, no questions. Okay. Concerns of commissioners? Any concerns a commissioner would like to share? Nope. Bob's leaving. Communications? We did have one, I believe, that came through about historic plaques.
Yeah, the Michigan Heritage Home Society is offering plaques for historic homes. I haven't been able to look at it and see what their criteria are. I suppose it's a nice alternative for people that might not qualify for our historic district plaques, but at the same time, I don't want people putting those up instead of ours, because ours are really cool.
Yeah.
And they cost about the same. They're both equally expensive. So, Yeah, it's just information.
They apply for them, they have applications for them?
Yeah, there's a little brochure. I found a stack of them on my desk at the office when I went
I'd like
in
to
last
see
week.
one someday.
Yeah,
Bring it
it's in
to
the
me.
packet. It's Mia attached it, she says.
Yeah.
In the packet?
Yeah, I think it was part of the, again, part of that email with the updated agenda and with the communications from other community members regarding a couple of the hearings.
Bob, I'll include that with your February paper minutes.
Okay. So you know, make notes of it,
Yeah,
and then fill me in later,
All right,
as well as the February minutes.
sounds good. Okay. I believe that's it. I now adjourn the March 10th HDC meeting. No